Thank you guys. Thanks everyone for being here. We're excited to share with you some really exciting stuff about advanced display tactics. And how many people in the room are utilizing some sort of a display ad in their advertising mix, in their digital advertising mix? So pretty much everyone. I think that this type of media has come a long way over the years, and so it's really exciting to share some of these more cool tactics here that we'll be sharing with you today. So first, the purpose of the conversation today is to go through 4 advanced display tactics. One being location-based targeting, the second being model-specific retargeting, the third being Gmail-sponsored promotions, and lastly, dynamic display ads. But first, we're going to go a little bit into the market potential for display. What you'll see here is display has grown at a rate of about 21% year after year after year. It's actually going to be a $74.4 billion industry in 2016. So the power of digital display is incredible. And we believe that part of the reason that the growth has been so tremendous is there's just so many more ways to target the right consumer at the right time using digital display. And part of the other reason that it's so critical is consumers are spending the majority of their time outside of search. So we all love paid search, and we probably all utilize it in some way. So we know that paid search is a great way to get the consumer to your website when they're actually searching. However, when they're not searching, when they're spending that 80% of their time online outside of search, we need to make sure that your dealership is front and center in front of them. Hence why this medium is crucial to your advertising mix. So this is probably one of my favorite slides in this whole presentation. And the reason it is because 24 average touch points are being taken in the car buying process now. 24 touch points is insane. And 18 or 19 of these are all digital touch points. So that just goes to show the amount of information that the consumer is gathering during their car buying process. And what you can see here is there's several instances where they're actually engaging with display during that car shopping process. So you can see it's an integral part. But what I think about is while they're doing all of these different 24 touch points, the opportunity you have with display is pretty incredible, because think about each of these different things that this person did. For instance, they visited a loan calculator on a third-party site. If we have a display ad right there showing them the vehicle that they were interested in while they're on that loan calculator site, that's pretty powerful. Similarly, when they're looking at the consumer reviews on the vehicle, say they're looking at the reviews for the Camry, if we can put that Camry ad right next to them, right as they're looking at those reviews, that's just incredibly powerful. So that's the sort of advanced display stuff that we're going to share with you today. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it to Dena, and she'll share with you a little bit about one of our tactics, which is location-based targeting.
Thanks, Nicole. So we're starting the presentation today with one of our 4 tactics being location-based targeting. And it's probably something that you might be vaguely familiar with or extremely familiar with, but it's a little bit of a newer tactic, and it's unique in the fact that it is completely focused on the mobile device's location. So many people spend all day on their mobile phones. Everybody in this room probably has one with them. It probably does not leave their side. We recently came across a statistic saying 80-something% of people actually sleep with their mobile device. They're using it as an alarm clock. It's truly completely integrated into our lives. And because of that, this is actually changing the way that consumers are behaving. It's changing and creating an immediacy of action. So consumers on their mobile devices are looking to get something immediately. If you want directions somewhere, you can get it immediately on your phone through a Maps app. If you want to find the address or location of a place of business, you could do that immediately. It's changing the expectations because it's raising them, because consumers are now used to that type of immediacy. And it's resulting in unscripted decisions. People are changing courses or making decisions that are more on the fly because of this mobile device. So because of these changes that are taking place, it's actually important that marketing and digital marketing follow suit and make changes as well. So a product like location-based targeting is actually derived from these types of changes. So location-based targeting, as I mentioned, focuses on the physical geographic location of the mobile device. So primarily, you're geographically targeting the ads based on a particular area or subcategory of areas. You're choosing a message that's relevant to that person in that physical location, and your ads are in real time. So that gives you an opportunity to create awareness for your dealership, to put a specific message in front of a consumer, or to promote an event that's actually happening at that moment. What's powerful about this is that you have the opportunity to engage shoppers in a specific location with a message that's relevant to them. So this is extremely powerful because you can expand awareness, you can send offers to people, you can promote your dealership. So some examples of how this might work is, say for example, you have a college in a nearby town, and you want to let those college students know that you have recent grad promotions at your dealership. You can actually put a 1, 2, 3, 4 mile radius around that university, and if customers in that area are using their mobile devices, they can be exposed to your specific message that's relevant to them because they are going to be college grads soon. You could do this with a military base. Say you have a military base nearby and you want to let the people that work at the military base know about promotions that you have that are relevant to them. You could actually even do this with a competing dealership. Say you're a Honda dealership and there's another Honda dealership across town. You can actually put a 1 mile radius around that competing dealership and give customers that are actually showrooming or looking at their mobile device on their lot an opportunity to come to your lot. Maybe you're going to tell them about the better selection that you have, or that you'll beat any competitors' pricing. So it gives you a really good and unique opportunity to reach a customer in a very specific location.
And the competitor one is one of our faves, just because if you think about it, we know that all the consumers are showrooming pretty much, or I think the stat was it was overwhelmingly majority of consumers are showrooming, meaning that while they're sitting there in your showroom, they're searching their phone to make sure they're getting a good deal. So given that we know they're already doing that, let's try and get that mobile ad to populate so that they can see why they should maybe come to when they're at the competitor showroom, see why they should come to your showroom. So it's a really neat opportunity to make sure you're front and center of that particular consumer. And you can do this around several different competitors and have that same message going for all of them. And just give the consumer the reason as to why they should come shop with you.
I have another fun example that I always like to share. I have a dealer located in Houston, Texas, and there's a really big rodeo that happens there every year. And this dealer was doing a lot of advertising, kind of tying in with the rodeo on television, tying in with it on radio. Some of their print ads were just kind of mentioning it. And so we came up with the idea, what if we target this rodeo with truck incentives? The customers that are going to this rodeo are likely going to be interested in purchasing a truck. They may not be in market now, but you're doing all these similar aspects of advertising through your traditional outlets. Let's try it from a digital perspective as well. And as customers are at this rodeo using their mobile devices, let's expose them to the truck incentives that you have at your local dealership.
And the best part with display these days is you're only paying when they click anyways, so you're only going to get that consumer that's interested in the ad to click. So it's obviously really relevant traffic.
I'm going to switch gears and pass this over to Nicole now to talk about model-specific retargeting. You've probably heard of remarketing before or retargeting. This is a little bit different take on it, and we call it model-specific retargeting.
So model-specific retargeting focuses on reconnecting with consumers that have been to your website with the model that they've shown interest in, very succinctly. So what the concept is here is you can think about several different consumers that have come to your website. And say one's interested in the Dodge Charger, another was interested in the Chrysler 200, and another is interested in the Dodge Dart. So essentially what you're doing is you're gathering that data and bucketing these consumers into categories of what they're interested in. So for instance, the first person's interested in the Dodge Charger, so we're going to bucket her into the Dodge Charger intenders. What we do next is we think about, basically this is an interest-driven targeting strategy. So we're capitalizing on knowing what the vehicle preferences are based on what they've done on your website. We're responding with immediate messaging, making sure that the right message gets in front of them. And we're really collecting the consumers that we know are in market because they visited that search results page or the vehicle details page of the vehicle they're really interested in. How this might look for the gal that was interested in the Charger. say she goes to your search engine results, or your search results page for the Charger inventory. We cookie her, indicate that she's interested in that Dodge Charger. Then as she visits various sites throughout the web, you can see any of the interest sites that she's particularly interested in. We're going to follow her with the Charger ad. Now what's really important here is we know that she's generally interested in the Charger. So how about we think about it from the perspective and not overcomplicate it. What do we have on our specials page for the Charger? If it's $199 a month lease, let's put that ad right in front of her to make sure that she knows that we have a lease special for that Charger, so that as she's shopping, we're continuing to stay top of mind for her, and she knows that we have that lease special. And then maybe we can change it up from month to month to just make sure that we're staying top of mind for her, because we know that she was an intender for this vehicle, so let's just continue to keep it front and center for her. So the concept, obviously, is how do we get them back to the site? And then once they come back on the site, what's really critical is you make sure you have to send them to a relevant landing page, either the page where the special is contained within, or the inventory, making sure, though, that that special is still visible, because we have to remember, if we're showing them a special for a particular lease, we want them to land on that exact lease so that that message continues to resonate. And then we want to make sure that there's some sort of a form there, so if she wants to know more, she can ask a question about it. We also want to make sure the phone number is visible. This is a no-brainer. And then lastly, we want to make it easy for her to browse that Charger inventory. So all makes complete sense. And a lot of you are probably pretty familiar with this because, this is not an uncommon strategy. The biggest difference of this one is that we're making sure that we're bucketing the consumers into their intender buckets. And we do this for various models. Typically, we suggest picking 3 of your top models to do this for, and continuously doing this month after month. So this ad format is optimized for mobile and across all different devices. We're seeing tremendous lift with mobile, so it's critical that all of your display ads are optimized for mobile. And with this particular display tactic, we're seeing higher click-through rates because we know the ad's more relevant for them. So much higher click-through rates than you're used to seeing on display, which is always super exciting. And then obviously the higher the click-through rate, the better the potential for conversion. And we'll talk a little bit more about conversions later on, because you can expect conversions out of your display campaign. It's not ridiculous to think about that. But we measure both real conversions, like an actual form submission, and we also want to measure the soft conversions, like did they go to the vehicle details page? Did they spend a good amount of time on the site? Did they visit several pages? So those are softer conversions that you should utilize to measure your display tactics as well. That being said, I'm going to let Dena go into Gmail-sponsored promotions.
Okay, Gmail-sponsored promotions are the fourth of the 4 things we're talking about. This one actually happens to be my favorite. It's unique, it's creative, and it's probably the one that the least people in this room have tried. So it's a very unique and cool product, and it's essentially email marketing with a twist of display advertising and pay-per-click. So it kind of brings you a little bit of all 3 of those elements, and it's a Google product utilizing their Gmail platform. So it gives you the opportunity to connect with the most likely consumer. You can target based on interests, you can target based on age, gender, language, device. All of these things are available to you utilizing Google's information that consumers are giving through their Gmail and through the interests of these customers as they're going along doing research and other various things online.
And if you think about this, this is actually just them skimming your Gmail to find out what your interests are. We know that if you're getting lots of emails about a car in particular, say for instance, that you might be interested in a car. Or if there's email content that has to do with a particular model, they can kind of skim all that and see all those words that are in your emails, and that's essentially how they're creating these targeting buckets for you. So it's really cool how they do this, and the product's even more exciting.
So how does it work? What does this look like? What is it actually doing? So anyone who has a Gmail account, you may notice that you have a promotions tab in your Gmail account. If you do not have a promotions tab, you're likely using an older version of Gmail, but you should start to see a promotions tab appear in your Gmail account in the next 6 months or so. But for those of you that have seen that promotions tab, what you'll notice is when you go there are actually ads in there that are sent from potential things that you might be potentially interested in, and you can click on them and it opens into a full-page email blast. The creative element that's in that full-page email blast is 100% customizable. It's simply a graphic. So in the way that email marketing works, you're putting a message in front of consumers in their inbox. The unique thing about Gmail-sponsored promotions is you only pay if the customer opens the email. So if you decide to keep your targeting pretty broad and not really rein it in, you're able to only pay if the consumer says, yes, I'm interested in this potential offer that you sent to my inbox. They click it, they open it, it's going to open into a full-page ad. So to really think about how this might work for you, you want to think email marketing meets paid search campaign. So again, the email marketing is sent through the consumer's Gmail in their promotions tab. If they open it, it's a full-page email marketing campaign. And really one of the strategies here is you have an opportunity to address consumers' immediate needs. Through all this information that Gmail's providing, you have the ability to know if someone is potentially interested in new tires. They're potentially interested in a new vehicle. And if you look at these campaigns here, you'll notice on the left, this offer is receive up to $80 in gift cards with a select tire purchase. So that gives the customer an immediate reason to actually want to click to go to your website. On the right here, bring in your tax return for guaranteed approval. So maybe you're targeting someone that this might be super relevant to, and you're giving them a reason, again, to click through to your website. The next important component here to remember is that you want to make sure you're sending them to a good page that's relevant and relates to what you're offering them. So let's go back to that tire campaign that we talked about before. What you'll want to do is make sure that if that consumer does choose to click on your ad, you take them to your tire page on your website. Or maybe you create a landing page that looks very similar to this graphic to give customers a reason to reach out and say, hey, I'm interested in this. Can I schedule an appointment? Can I talk to someone about what types of tires are available through this promotion? And what's great is that if the customer opens the email, that's when you're charged. If they click on it to go to your website, you're not charged again. So it's an opportunity to really get an extremely relevant and valuable impression to someone. And then if they choose to take action on that, you're not charged. You can also save the email in your promotions tab to go back to look at it later. Or you can forward it to a friend. So maybe you opened this and you want to tell your husband and wife about it so that they can take action for you. You can forward it to them and then it'll show up in their promotions tab. And when they open it, they're not charged again since you already opened it. So really, really innovative thinking there on Google's part and really effective with the ability to put a message in front of consumers and only pay if they're interested in it.
What I also love about this is if you think about this as an email marketing tool, because it kind of is similar to that, and you compare it to the price of sending out emails, which I love to dive in deeper with any dealer, quite frankly. But if you think about with email marketing, you pay tiny amounts per email sent, but you have to pay for every email sent, right? For this, you're only paying when they open the email. So it would be an interesting analysis to look at the cost of what your email marketing is doing versus the cost of this, because this you're only paying when they actually click to open the email. So it's kind of a neat concept to compare directly. You know, rough calculations of it, it looks like it's about 50% less than the cost of doing email marketing. But again, you know, I think we have to dive into more data, but it's a pretty interesting concept when you compare it to email marketing.
And the open rates of the emails that we've done so far have been very, very high, significantly higher than a traditional email marketing campaign. A traditional email marketing campaign is going to have a relatively low open rate, whereas these campaigns we were seeing upwards of 20% open rates. So really high amounts of people opening these because they're very relevant. And when you think about the process of that promotions tab, you might think people probably won't go there because they think it's junk. Well, that might be true for some people, but for other people, when they're going there, they're giving their undivided attention to those promotions in there. They're saying, which ones do I want to look at? So you're actually making it easier rather than cluttering it up with personal emails in that inbox. So it's giving the customer a way to kind of separate themselves from that and look at what promotions they might be interested in.
This is one of those products that was in beta only several months ago and just was released recently. So it's really new. So kind of just neat product to utilize to target and get ahead of the game and try and, you know, take advantage of some inexpensive costs there.
Great. So just to kind of dive a little bit deeper into the way that the targeting works, you're able to target using data captured by Gmail, including vehicle interests, and take them to an extremely relevant page on your website in order to achieve all that relevant traffic. So it's following a really easy process. It's using Gmail's information, getting qualified customers, getting the right message in front of them. So it really gives you a very unique way to get a relevant message in front of a customer that is very relevant to your business. Going to dive into our fourth and final display tactic. It's called dynamic display advertising. It's probably one of the more advanced ones of the four we talked about today, and I'm going to turn it over to Nicole.
Yeah, this is one of my favorites, and this one's probably the heaviest on collecting data to make really smart decisions because it's all done through a data management platform. So I'm excited to share it with you. So this one's, the basics of it is it's updating ad content in real time to match the user's interest. So we'll dive into a little bit about what we know so far and what we've talked about. So we know that auto purchasers are spending more time researching in the 3-month window. So they have, the high touch points. There's lots of research being done. We also know that the majority are entering the market uncertain on what model they're interested in purchasing. So it's not like the old days of, they know exactly what car they're ready to buy. They're looking at several different vehicles because all of that information is so readily available to them. And we know that they're considering more vehicles and that they're visiting fewer dealerships and taking fewer test drives. And all of this in combination with they're less brand loyal. They're not considering the same brand that they bought, and particularly when you think about millennials. So what this particular advertising does is it's real-time dynamic advertising. So it takes all of their online activities. So say they're browsing at different research sites. Say they're, it gathers all of these online activities that they're doing. It takes their research habits. It takes, preferences that they're looking at online. And lastly, looks at their interests. So it's taking all of this information about the consumer, gathering it into a big data warehouse. So if you think about that, that's pretty powerful, right? And you probably are seeing a lot of this, again, online. When you think about it, I think the biggest instance of this that I've heard is, it's really interesting. This restaurant targeted me. I hadn't even been to their website, and they just somehow knew. And that's kind of what this all is. It's really, even before they get to your website, how do we find them and market to them before they even come to the website? So, by gathering all of this data, we're able to do that. So we know that the path to purchase has 24 different touch points, as we discussed earlier. So they're doing a variety of things within these 24 touch points. They're going to review sites, and they're looking at what do the reviews look like for this particular vehicle or for this particular dealership. They're going to research sites, looking at, what's the MPG ratings, what's the consumer report ratings. They're going to the vehicle listing sites, the cars.com, the auto traders. We know that they're shopping for a lot of cars there, configuring cars, looking at all their different options. And of course, we know that they're going to dealer sites as well. So we want to take all of that data in aggregate and pull it all together and target based on all of that data. And the great thing about this particular one is that you can utilize that data and target all during these different phases. So if they're on kbb.com, we can actually target them with the car that they're looking at on kbb.com that we have in our inventory. So it's pretty powerful. So what this might look like is you can see an example of the ad. And basically, it's pulling in the inventory of the dealership that's relevant to that consumer based on their past search habits. So it's taking all of that information that we just talked about from their browsing habits and pulling the relevant cars off of your inventory and showing it to them in real time, which is really cool. Again, part of the reason that it's one of my favorite ads. And the best part about this is that you have to do nothing. It does it all for you. It scans your site, pulls the right vehicles, and shows it to the right person. And when they click on whatever particular vehicle they're interested in on the ad, they actually go straight to the vehicle details page. So it's a really great way. We know that when they go to that vehicle details page, that's a great thing, because if we get more traffic there, we can get more sales. The other thing, that's kind of, I think, pretty unique and cool is that if I'm looking for the A4, the Audi A4, and I'm looking at the Audi A6, say I'm interested in both, and I've been cross-shopping a lot on both because I can't decide if the A6 is worth the additional expense, but I like the A4 too. And I'm just kind of constantly cross-shopping. It actually knows that because of all the behavior. So it'll serve you some of the A4s and it'll serve you some of the A6s. That way you can kind of see both of those vehicles in that ad, and the consumer has selection in the ad. So there's up to 7 vehicles right there in the ad, and it'll pull both of those from the site. So it's a very cool medium to, again, the concept being, get that consumer the right ad at the right time. The critical thing about this, though, is the ad placement strategy. So there's a tremendous network of sites that you need to have access to make sure you keep following that consumer, and so that you can stay in front of them during these 24 points that they're going through as they're going through the buying cycle. So you have to definitely make sure that you have auto-specific sites included. We know that those are always great to include. We want to make sure we have the cars.com. We want to make sure we have the KBB. So those are included. But just keeping in mind that we're not targeting the site, we're targeting the person. So, gone are the days of just spending money on cars.com with banner ads. Let's target the right person as they go through the shopping cycle. And then, of course, all of this is done in real time with real-time bidding so that we can get an effective cost. And it's all done on a CPC basis. So it's very familiar with any other type of strategy that we're used to. So we're only going to pay when they actually click on that ad. And then last but certainly not least is it's all going to be geographically targeted. Let's make sure we keep a good radius on it so we don't get traffic that we don't want. So the advantages of the dynamic display campaign are that your ad content's driven by the interest of the user rather than being predetermined by the advertiser. So again, we're not just placing ads on sites, we're placing ads in front of the consumer based on their behavior. And that's, if you can take anything away from today, it's making sure you're always doing that with your display campaigns. Let's make sure we target the user based on what we know about them. It's personalizing the ad content to each user, making sure that we're showing them the right ad with the right content. It's definitely going to increase your conversion opportunities. And then lastly, capturing that click-through data that will allow us to continue to retarget to them. So that's even better. So if we can get that click from the intender and get them to our website and then keep on retargeting to them because now we know that we got additional data from them because they came to our website, that's really powerful. So it balances the retargeting element with also really identifying the auto-specific or the consumers that haven't been to your website yet. So this particular advertising medium is highly effective. We know that we'll reach in-market shoppers with the vehicles they're interested in, delivering more visits to the VDPs. And we know that when we get more visits to our VDPs, our vehicle detail pages, we're able to sell more cars. So as long as we have good process. So that being said, we're going to switch into some best practices. This is the fun and easy part of our presentation. Some common best practices of display advertising that I think you'll find pretty interesting. One thing is just make sure that you're constantly optimizing results. One way to do this is to make sure you're working with a digital provider that really understands display, because it is pretty complicated. It's a big universe out there. And there's there's a lot of good vendors that you can utilize to make sure that you're doing this right. And what a digital provider will do is they'll analyze your needs and what's the objective here? Are we trying to drive awareness of our dealership, or are we trying to just get more conversions? What's the real objective here? And it varies, right? Because if you're new to a market and nobody knows you, it might be more awareness based. So that would change the direction of which display tactic you would utilize. Versus if you're really well known but you're just trying to drive conversions, that would be a totally different route. So it's all about understanding the needs first, and then developing the strategy, the display strategy that you'll do to make sure that that you address those needs. Then making sure that the creative is executed right is critical. We went through several different examples, and I think everyone, hopefully, that you heard would be customized to whatever the dealership's doing. And that's critical. Try not to have those cookie cutter ads. Try and have a really good ad to make sure that you're getting the consumer, because it's a very crowded space out there. There's a lot of display ads that are pretty awful. So you want to make sure you're utilizing an agency that knows how to put together a great ad. And then critical is optimizing placement. So, we want to make sure that we're showing up on the right sites to the right person at the right time.
going to dive into a bit of best practices for design. As you may know, the way that the image looks or the way that the display ad looks actually dramatically influences what the consumer is going to do with it. So it's extremely important to make sure you have consistent dealership branding. Does your ad match your website? Does your ad match some of the other advertising you do? Does it have your logo on it? Does it have the color scheme that fits your dealership? Does it have a consistent theme with all the other advertising and branding efforts that you do? Is it eye-catching? Is it visually appealing? When you look at it, do you want to learn more? Or does it just have a ton of text on it and it's really not appealing to your visually? Make sure that you have refreshed creative. You don't want to be running the same ad for 6, 7, 8 months because customers are not going to be enticed by it anymore. You want to make sure that you're refreshing your creative every month or every other month if it's strictly a branding ad. You want to have high quality vehicle photos. It's extremely important to make sure that the photos that are on there are good quality. What you can do that actually is the best case scenario is have real photos of the vehicles that they're looking at. Maybe it's taken by someone at the dealership. Maybe it's in front of the dealership. Something that is actually appealing to the customer about the vehicles that they might go see. If that's not an option for you, just make sure you're using high quality stock photos that are not blurry or not maybe the wrong model trim or the wrong model in general. So just make sure you're using high quality photos. Make sure you're using good, proper grammar. It's really important to make sure that if the customer is going to take the time to read your ad, that it's correct. Make sure that you have enticing, relevant messages. A lot of times we forget about how important the message is to the consumer. You know, you spend lots of time with your traditional advertising agency, or your traditional agency spends a lot of time coming up with messaging that goes along with the specials that you want to do. So utilize those. Make sure that they're enticing for the customer or giving them a reason to engage with your ad. And make sure you have an attention-grabbing headline. You want to make sure that you're capturing the interest of the customer as soon as possible and not having something that's very cookie-cutter.
And then, you know, the call to action has to be really simple and clear. We know that, you know, we need to tell the consumer what we want them to do next, and we often don't think of that. I think so often we'll throw an ad out there that has a lease incentive on it, and then it doesn't tell us what to do next. And it seems really simple and obvious, but it, quite frankly, happens all the time where you see an ad and it's not telling you what to do next. So tell the consumer what to do next. Do I want them to learn more about the offer? Do I want them to view my inventory? Do I want them to call me? And if so, I should have a phone number on the ad. I can't tell you how many times I've seen call me with no phone number. Or, you know, I want this car. So again, just thinking about that, you're a consumer. You see display ads all the time. But how often do you see them and you know, just ignore them maybe because they're not calling out to you enough? We have to tell the consumer what we're offering them and what we want them to do next. So, you know, take advantage of this offer. You know, just thinking about different lines that you can do and test those. You know, the great thing about this is that you can get instantaneous information on how your ad performs. One dealer group that we're working with actually has this concept of a new branding campaign, and they want to test new messages. So, you know, you can put one message versus another and look at the click-through rate. Which message is resonating more with the consumer? That's a really neat thing about display advertising, is that you can test the creative constantly and see what's working well. And again, do it in the same month. Run them both equally. See who clicks more on, you know, which one. So.
Next, we have an example ad unit for you to look at here. So this is kind of reiterating some of the touch points that we talked about when creating a nice ad. You want to make sure it has an attention-grabbing headline, a high-quality vehicle photo, an enticing, relevant message, a clear call to action, and consistent dealership branding. So if you look through here, lease for $259 per month, that's what's going to grab the attention of the customer. A nice photo of a Charger that looks great. You're telling them what they're looking at, and you want them to learn more. You want them to learn more about this offer.
And one thing I would add is just make sure we don't put too much in the ads. You know, that's one common thing, is that we're all used to, you know, trying to cram as much into a newspaper ad or TV ad. You know, you're trying to get as much as you can in because we have a value proposition, then we have to, you know, then we have a lease incentive, and then, you know, we want to give like 5 different reasons as to why they should come shop with us. Obviously, the display format doesn't bode well for the display format. So make sure you're minimizing it. Typically, one of these display ads is appearing on a page where there's lots of content. So the simpler your ad and the cleaner your ad, the better, because you're competing against lots of content, so you don't want to have lots of content in your ad. You want to make it very clean, simple, and succinct. And that's probably one of the biggest opportunities that I see most often in display mistakes or errors, is you see an ad that's just trying to do way too much. So
to kind of piggyback off what Nicole was saying as well, when you go to a website and you see display ads on the page, there's never going to be just one. There's probably going to be 3, 4, 5, 6. So what is your ad doing to stand out from the other ads? And like Nicole said, you want it to be simple and clear, but you also want it to be unique. You don't want your ad to look exactly the same as a couple other ads right there on the same page, and the only difference being your dealership's name listed on there instead of the others, because that doesn't give the customer any reason to choose one over the other. So make sure that your creative is extremely unique to your dealership.
And then one of the best things about digital, as many of us might know, is that you can track it. But I think what a common fallacy about display advertising is that it's okay to have a really high bounce rate. And it's not. It may have a higher bounce rate, but it's not okay for it to be like 99% or 95%. So look at your analytics and analyze how your traffic's doing. Are they staying on the site for a little while? We know that it's not going to stay on the site probably as long as a paid search campaign, because we're reaching a little bit higher in the funnel. They're not there yet. They're not actively searching. But we know, we want a little bit of stickiness, right? So when we pay for these visitors, we need to be reasonable at our expectations on how long they're sticking on the site, how many pages they're viewing, because it is going to be a bit lower than paid search. But test different forms and see which one does better, because there's lots of different ways to run display. And if you can find the one that gives you better traffic as opposed to not so great traffic, that's the one you should stick with. So that's part of the reason that we went through several different tactics, because it's kind of just always wanting to search to find which tactic works best for your dealership. What's really resonating with your consumer? And you can see obviously the performance of the Gmail sponsored promotions in analytics as well. You can see how the traffic from other sites is working. So is the traffic coming from kbb.com? Is that working really well for you in combination? Because maybe then we should increase the bids for that type of traffic. So that's how you really optimize these campaigns, and you can constantly make them better. I would say often though they're not optimized. So that's critical, is making sure that they do get optimized.
So you should always make sure that you have all correct formats of your display ads. You want to have ads that are set up for success on desktop, tablet, and mobile. Oftentimes you see ads on your mobile device that are not mobile-sized ads or mobile-optimized ads, and that's not going to give the user the best experience. You want to make sure that if it's a mobile ad, it's actually going to fill the whole length of their screen and make it easier for them to click on that ad and experience it and see what it says, versus it being a much smaller square that's kind of shrunk down and not optimized for mobile. So it's important to make sure that you're looking at your display ad creative and getting all those different elements for all the different formats that they're going to be on.
And mobile is kind of a big one, because we know that mobile traffic is growing so much, as we discussed earlier. So you also want to actually measure your display campaign on desktop versus mobile. And this is a really fun one, because you'll actually be shocked at the amount of traffic that you can get from mobile. So this is an example of a client that's really heavy with mobile. They're getting a ton of impressions from mobile. And you can see there's a pretty good click-through rate, right? So the one thing to be cautious of, though, with mobile, too, is to take it to the next level and see how that traffic's performing on the site. So are they sticking around for a little while, or was it an accidental click? Because that does happen a lot. So if you see a really inflated click-through rate, you might be getting accidental clicks. So we always worry about those, because those aren't good. We don't want accidental clicks. We want the good ones that people intended to click it. So you always want to watch your mobile versus desktop to make sure you're preventing those accidental clicks, and make sure you're optimizing by device. So if you are getting a good return and they're sticking around on your mobile site for a while, let's spend more on mobile. Let's make sure we're optimizing by device.
Yeah, that's where I think it's really important too to look at what they're doing after they're clicking. So you can see in this example here that it had a high click-through rate on mobile, but they actually had 2 form submissions from it, which is excellent. And you actually can see site engagement conversions here. So 214 site engagement conversions from mobile. And site engagement conversions is what Nicole was mentioning before, like a soft conversion. So we're used to looking at conversions as a phone call and an email form, and we do keep those separate because we think it's important to know the difference because there's a different value for them. But a soft conversion or a site engagement conversion does show us that that customer did actually interact with your website after clicking on your display ad. Maybe they looked at your inventory, so you know some of these are inventory page views. Maybe they were on your site for more than 2 minutes. Maybe they went to your specials page. Maybe they went to your hours and directions page. Those things are important to know because it does show value in that customer clicking on your display ad. And what's really unique about display ads, and quite frankly pretty cool, is that you can look at the number of people that were exposed to your display ad but did not click, and then later submitted a form on your website. So that helps to show you the impact that that display campaign can have, even if that customer is not directly clicking and then submitting a form. Because we know that, as Nicole mentioned before, the 24 touch points of a consumer going through that process, if our display ad is influencing them at any point during that process, that's successful. And sometimes if you just look at a few core metrics for display, you might think this isn't really working. I'm spending $1,500, I'm just getting some people to my website. What are they doing afterward? They're not submitting any forms. You might think it's really not working. But if you're having the opportunity to influence these customers along the way, and you can see that even though they didn't click on the ad, they were exposed to the ad, and then later maybe came to your website through paid search and converted, you're able to see that those two things were working together. So your display campaign was having an influence and having an impact on your website and your leads, just in a different way.
So to summarize, the 4 advanced display tactics that we talked about here today are location-based targeting, and location-based targeting was really targeting the user based on where they're located. We discussed model-specific retargeting, which was targeting the consumer based on the model that they were interested in, and continuing to follow them with that model that they were interested in. Gmail-sponsored promotions, which Dena reviewed, which is basically email marketing meets paid search, and a really new way to get people to your website via email marketing. And lastly, the dynamic display ads, which target the consumer whether they've been to your website or not, with the vehicle that they're interested in, with the potentially 7 vehicles that they might be interested in. So that summarizes really quickly, what we reviewed here today. We'd love to get thoughts and questions from you all. And here, just to summarize, we're L2T Media, so we specialize in all digital products, and we definitely can answer any questions that you guys have at this point. Yes. Great question. Automotive average, the question was, what is an acceptable bounce rate? And automotive average, we've seen usually max that we like on automotive to have an overall bounce rate average is about 40%. That's usually the max that we like to see. I think the average is probably around 25%. I'd need to catch up and look, but I think that that's about the average. Display tactics can be a bit higher than the average, but your organic traffic will bring down the average. So display tactics, depending on what they are, you can see anything, of course, from probably the best I think we've seen is 50% probably on display.
Actually, even like less, 25 to 30 on those dynamic display programs. But one other thing to add is it's important to know the way you're looking at it can depend on the page you're taking them to. If you're taking them to your inventory, it should be a little bit lower because there's a lot of things for them to do there. If you're taking them to a specials page or say a specific landing page with just that offer and there's not a whole lot for them to do there, then you can expect a little bit higher of a bounce rate. Because if they're gathering that information and then leaving your website and they have that in their head, they might want to call later, stop by later. If it's a little bit higher, you kind of have to understand that could be why.
Yeah, and that's where it's always important to consider where you're sending them to and think about that. The definite best results that we see is when you're taking them to inventory because it's giving them options on what they can do. So if you're taking them to for instance, for that Dodge Charger example earlier, the model-specific retargeting, if we're taking them to all of the Dodge Chargers and giving them some selection to choose from, that actually usually performs really well with bounce rate because And typically, I think the model-specific retargeting is anywhere from like 30 to 40%, which is great because we're giving them a lot of options to choose from, and we know that they're interested in that vehicle. Good question. Yes?
You mentioned that display can be tracked, one metric can be tracked to follow the person when they complete the conversion later.
Yeah.
So would view-through conversion then end up being one of the KPIs?
Yeah,
absolutely.
Absolutely. So the question was, for the view-through conversions, which are one of the softer conversions but still kind of really valuable to look at, the view-through conversion is when they essentially saw the ad, were exposed to the ad, but then came back later and converted somehow, but they didn't click on the ad to convert. They just came back later and converted. And that's absolutely a key performance indicator that you should look at because it does show that that ad impacted their behavior, even though they didn't directly click on the ad. And if you think about form submissions too, you know, I know we sometimes might judge and say, wow, there are only a couple form submissions. But with display advertising, that's not the only goal out of display advertising because we have to remember we are in front of the right person and we're getting our message in front of them. So you have to give some leeway to display advertising in that you're just branding. You know, we don't always judge that billboard that we put up and say, nobody came in the dealership because of that billboard. We know that there's an element of branding there because it's on the right highway. Same concept with display. We know we're targeting the right audience with this display ad, so we have to give some leeway to how hard we judge it on the analytical side, which I think is a big opportunity for dealers because this is really targeted and it's a really cool form of a billboard, an online billboard, and we have to, you know, use it in that way sometimes. Yes?
It's hard to say it's bad to use this campaign for to optimize more conversions or brand.
Yeah. So the question was, is it bad? I think the question was, is it bad to optimize for conversions with a display campaign, and or is it okay to just accept that display campaign's branding? Is that a good summary? Okay. So I think that, and you may want to take this, but I think it really depends on the dealer's needs and it's very situational depending on where you're at. But I'm perfectly fine with general brand awareness with certain dealers and in certain situations. However, I think that we also have to take advantage of how powerful the tracking is and make sure that we are optimizing, utilizing that data. So I would say that it depends on the needs. If you're doing a grand opening and you know, new ownership, and you really just want to get more high level and really just shoot out impressions and you don't care about that, that's perfectly okay if you're just looking for that, you know, if that's the goal. But if you're looking for, you know, more of those conversions and you're really honed in on car sales, then I would definitely lean towards using more targeted display tactics and optimizing by conversion data and time on site and things like that. The average conversion rate, it varies by display tactic. So it varies, but and also by where you're sending them. So it's a really almost impossible question to answer, unfortunately, just because, you know, if we're sending them to that page where it's just kind of giving them the incentive or the offer, and they're, you know, you can't measure the phone call. That's a tough one. But you know, I would say
it's a few percent, but it's tough to answer.
It's a slightly lower percent than paid search, but you should have, you know, maybe a percentage off of the clicks would be a good benchmark. But we actually, as a company, think about that all the time and try to dive into it. It just, everyone sends the traffic to different places, so it's a really hard thing to do. And offers can be more enticing, so it's really impossible to give a fair average.
Yeah.
Yes. Wait,
It's hard to show the rise of display advertising. A lot of displays just become. The sad news is most of the display ads I get, other dealers are 1,000 miles away. They can't know it's running. But is that because technology works like this by technology some of the time, or is that because they don't know how to do it? And if they don't,
So that's kind of a twofold answer.
You
One,
wanna repeat the question?
oh, sorry. Yeah, the question was, he sometimes sees ads for dealerships that are thousands of miles away. Is that correct? Why are they doing that? And is it because the technology is just incorrect? It doesn't always work. And how do they know they're doing that? So the first answer is that is incorrect. A lot of times remarketing campaigns are set up without geographic targeting. So you've been to their website maybe, and now even though you live across the country, you're being remarketed to because they're like, oh, they went to my website, this is relevant. Well, it might be relevant, but it's still best to put a radius setting so you're targeting people who visited your site within, and it could be big, it could be 100 miles, it could be 200 miles, but you don't want them from 1,000 miles away. And then the one way you could know it without even asking or seeing it is going into Google Analytics, because you can actually see a map of where people are coming from to your website in Google Analytics.
Only if they click.
Yeah.
And these weren't retargeting site, so they're pretty small.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the only
They're
other,
not optimizing.
the only
So they wouldn't know unless somebody got my click.
they would know.
Orlando, Florida, is a Seattle, Washington. Obviously, without that, there's no way to know.
Not
Yeah,
really.
well, I think that there would be one other way to know, and your click-through rate then should be really low, right? Because if we're throwing a lot of impressions out there and nobody's clicking, your click-through rate would be lower.
It's low to begin with.
What is the percentage?
Yeah.
0.2% or 2%, but you got that's a low number of acres,
So,
that's why
yeah.
I'm not being negative. But I'm just curious, I'm just trying to find out if there's a way of optimizing play outside of the interstate you say. But I hate wasting
Yeah.
more than anything else in the world. And I just was wondering if there's a way I could tell them wasting money, like
I would just ask your provider, whoever's doing it, can you tell me what the geo settings are?
Yeah, that would be the question. And then also, you could potentially, the CTR would be much, much lower than that. And then the last thing would be that, I was trying to think, if they're buying it based on impressions, then you would be wasting money. If they're buying it based on cost per click, you're not wasting any money because likely you're not clicking on it, so they're not paying for that. So that's the caveat, but it depends on how they're buying it. And that's a great question that we didn't point out today, but always ask, how are you buying this? Are you buying it on a CPC basis? If so, what is my CPC and what are you taking? Same questions as you have for your paid search providers, because it's the same concept. What's the difference between what you're paying the media and what you're charging me?
Yeah, it's a good question. I see them all the time for clients of mine.
It's a great question.
Well, to piggyback off this question, would you recommend turning off area of interest in the geolocation? Because then by default, because their actual location, and also finding land, and I type in, maybe whatever land was looking at your, and then actually type in or I'm searching for something in our land.
Yeah. No, that's a great question. So what the question was is that there's a setting in Google AdWords, for instance, that talks about area of interest. So that means that if they've been expressing interest in a certain area, but that maybe their IP is not in that area, then we don't, you can turn it on or off depending on what the objective is. Now, for the answer, in a lot of instances, if you're a dealership that has snowbirds, for instance, we recommend leaving it, getting the people that travel back to their house and keeping that on is a good thing because those are potential customers. But if you're in an area where you're pretty much always getting customers from around you, then we might turn it off. It would be a testing thing to turn it on or off based on what the results that we're seeing with click-through rate. So does click-through rate improve? Do we get better quality traffic if we turn it on or off?
I think there's a question over here. I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
Do you have concrete numbers for ad block usage? Let's say a lot of
Oh, the ad block usage? We do not have any concrete numbers for ad block usage. It's a good question, but we don't have any. But we come over afterwards and we can dive into it. But I couldn't give that offhand.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Frequency cap? Yes, great question. the question was, what do you recommend for a frequency cap? And for anyone who doesn't know what that is, frequency cap means how many times do we hit these people over the head with the ad until they actually, there's a factor, and it's a really tough balancing act. But the factor is that some people, after seeing it so many times, you'll get an annoyance click, meaning that I'm so sick of seeing this ad, but I'm going to click on it. And usually that's not a great click. So there's a really fine balance between showing it enough to get the frequency there and showing it too much. And I would say that ours changes quite a bit constantly, and we're constantly tweaking it. But there is a delicate balance to optimizing and utilizing frequency cap to optimize.
I think it depends on the goal of the campaign too. Like, as to Nicole's point before, if it's you're opening a new dealership, it's a grand opening, you might really want to hit people over the head with it, and you're okay with that. If it's a really exclusive offer or something that is maybe promoting some type of event, again, you might want it to be kind of hit over the head. But if it's something a little bit different, maybe that's not your goal. Off the top of your head, 7
I can't remember
per day,
actually.
I think.
We can get back to you. I would literally have to go back to the director of our digital department and ask. But I know that it's a constant nuance.
And there's actually some optimizing that you can do too to make it set up kind of scheduled, where the first 3 days after a customer visits your website, if this is a remarketing campaign, you can increase your frequency and then have it kind of taper. Because they're going to be the most relevant right after they've visited your website. You can also increase your frequency for people who have visited your website through paid search. You already paid for them to come to your site. Let's really aggressively target them if they came through paid search, because you already paid for that. So there's other things that you can do to kind of affect that as well. Probably will make relatively marginal differences in your results, but it's always worth A/B testing.
Great question. Any others? Great questions from everyone. Yes?
I live in a rural area, county 17,000 people, and Wisconsin, the closest big city, 230,000, that's 60 miles away though. How well does something like this work?
The best thing about the display is it's really just not that much different from PPC. Are you doing any sort of paid search? Here's the deal. People, particularly with mobile devices, are still connected, to the internet, and it's just another way to get your name out there for people around you. Now, if you only want to target that small radius around, or whatever radius you decide to target, you have to remember that we're only targeting the people that maybe, if there's not a lot of internet connected people, but there's probably a lot of cell phones, maybe we just do a mobile campaign and really hone in on mobile, because we want to make sure to get those people when they're on their mobile devices. So I think there's a way to tailor it to every different situation, but that's why the best approach is making sure that you have that conversation with the digital provider that you choose, find out the needs, what you're looking to do, and target it appropriately. And don't do a cookie cutter approach, because if you do the cookie cutter approach without the right settings, then it probably wouldn't work out for you. So it's about tailoring it the right way. But again, at the end of the day, you're only going to pay if they're really interested, because you're only paying if they're clicking. And then as long as they're sticking around on the website for a good amount of time and they look like a pretty good visitor, then I would say it would be a good thing, and you probably won't spend a whole lot of money on it.
If you guys have any additional follow-up questions, feel free to come by our booth. We have a booth in the expo hall, and we'd love to take your questions and talk more with you and share anything that maybe we missed.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much for being here. Sure.